and Luke. Another person writes, there is a teaching that Mark is addressing primarily the Roman population, Matthew the Jewish population, and Luke the Greek population. Is this true, and would you discuss the purposes of each book?
Well, I'd like to say that this is a kind of question that I've heard lots of people discuss from time to time and ask, but it's not one of the questions I can answer very well, and I don't think anybody else can answer it very well. Because Matthew has a lot of marvelous things about which you can say, we can translate back to Hebrew and get Jewish ideas from them, rabbinic ideas and parallels and things like that. People have sometimes said Matthew was writing to the Jews. I think that this is just pure nonsense. The reason I say that is because there are many things, there are a number of things in the Gospel of Matthew which show that the writer, our writer of Matthew, did not know Jewish things. He did not know Hebrew. He knew Greek. And what is glorious about Matthew is that he has carefully preserved many marvelous Jewish texts. But I cannot tell you fully why he preserved all his texts. Therefore, I cannot tell you fully what was all his purpose in writing. He did a tremendous job, but I'm not sure what all that purpose was. If you come to the Gospel of Luke, he tells us very well in the very beginning of his book that he has himself investigated the order of the way things ought to have gone and did go, and he has done his best to try to preserve the accounts of eyewitnesses. And now what is obvious with Luke, it seems to me, is that he recognizes that there are people trying to reconstruct the gospel story, the kind of problem that I've discussed this morning, and he has come up with a solution, the solution that he feels is best. So you can see a real purpose in Luke in that he is trying his best to get back to the most original story, and perhaps that is the way one should express it. With the gospel writer of Mark, he hasn't told us what his purpose was, but when I read it and see all these Targumic things that he does, I can't help but feel that his main purpose was to what may I call it, act or out or write out the art of the Targumic writer. A Targumic writer enjoyed doing the kind of things that Mark does. And there were many times when I was working on this problem over several years when I used to say, well, Lord, why did you allow Matthew and Mark and Luke to have these different ways in which they go? Why especially did you let Mark do this particular thing? And, you know, the Lord didn't answer that. He let me just think through that a little bit, and I finally came to the conclusion that Mark has used a certain kind of art. It is not the kind of art that I would have appreciated fully, but I have begun to understand why Mark did it. And I think it's kind of great to just see him. I said in that little J, this is his glory, you know. What he's doing, paraphrasing, is his glory. Now, this means that God has allowed people to work with what are the greatest texts of all life, the story of Jesus, in the way that they wanted to. And one thing it tells me about the Lord, at least, and that is that the Lord allows an enormous lot of freedom. You know, he allows us just almost to do as we please in many respects. Hal has a good way of saying that when you understand how the gospel writer Mark worked especially, he feels that he can preach a little bit better. He can say things that he would not want to be written down in a doctoral thesis. He can preach and say the things that he feels are good. He adds his art to the story of Jesus like Mark did. But if I'm trying to get back to the earliest wording of Jesus, then I've got to go back to texts in Matthew and Luke and reconstruct and rework with them. Now, somebody asked this question: is God not capable of having preserved his word perfectly for us today? what would be his purpose of have been in allowing his word to have become obfuscated? That's a big word. I don't usually use that. Become obfuscated in the way you have described. Well, I cannot answer that fully, except that I say God has given to even our gospel writers a tremendous amount of freedom to do as they please, especially Mark. When I get to heaven, I want to spend some time with Mark and ask him some questions. And I think that he will just wink at me when he starts to answer those questions. I don't know whether I've got some other things here that follow that along or not. There are some that are
Just a
difficult.
moment, Dr. Lindsey. Let's let Hal make some comments here on this subject of Mark.